Welcome to Firearms Friday from the Wyoming State Museum here in Cheyenne. I'm Evan Green. I'm the firearms historian at the museum. And this is the third and final video in our series on Springfield Armory firearms. And we have now moved into the repeating rifle era. This is a Craig Jorgensen patent, caliber 30-40, and you'll see this, the trend continues. We're going smaller and smaller in calibers with these military rifles. The old trapdoor Springfield single shot, pretty much outdated technology, and again in the trials of 1892 the Army selected this particular rifle as their long gun of choice, and the Colt 38 double-action revolver as the pistol to be issued to troops. So this was used by regular troops in the Spanish-American War, both in Cuba and in the Philippines, for the Spanish-American War as well as the Philippine-American War, called the Philippine Insurrection, or in my terms, the Philippine War for Independence, because the Philippine people fully expected that after the United States drove the Spanish out of their country, that they would be given their independence after being under Spanish rule, Spanish colonization for about 300 years. The United States was not that generous and didn't give Philippines their independence until after World War II. So anyway, Craig rifle, kind of a unique firearm. It has one of the smoothest bolt actions of any bolt action rifle that I've ever handled, certainly as good as my Model 70 Winchester, much better. Dean and I agree it's much slicker than our Mosin-Nagant Russian bolt action rifles, but it's really a smooth action. It's got a unique feed system in that you open this door on the side and you can feed cartridges into the rotary magazine. So it is not particularly quick to reload. And when the Americans in Cuba encountered the Spanish, who were armed with Mauser bolt-action rifles, they were somewhat disappointed in the performance of the Craig. The Spanish Mauser fed with stripper clips, so instead of poking them in one at a time from the side, you could align that stripper clip with the magazine in the Spanish Mauser and load 5 rounds at a time. The Spanish Mauser was also somewhat more ballistically efficient because it shot a boat-tailed, spear-pointed bullet, whereas the 30-40 Craig shot a big old fat round-nosed bullet. But an interesting development. The Jorgensen was a engineer and developer, gunsmith, and developed this rifle. And it certainly had its advantages and its good points, but again, the loading was problematic, as was the cartridge it was chambered for. It had a magazine cutoff in that you could flip this switch up and you had to single load it, so you could keep the 4 in the magazine for an emergency. But again, didn't perform as well as the Spanish Mauser during the Spanish-American War and the war in the Philippines. So, Craig Jorgensen, adopted in 1892 by the United States military. Okay, we're going to look at a carbine. This is mostly just show and tell, but I wanted to bring out the Craig carbine that we have in the collection. The functions exactly the same as the rifle, including the loading through the door on the side here. So this is a pretty good shape. This carbine's in pretty good shape, and I think it's interesting, I do, that there's this brand, what appears to be a brand carved into the stock. And brands have been recorded in the state of Wyoming since before statehood. So this appears to be a curved imprint and 2 parallel lines. So I was able, through the help of state archives and the state brand board, to find the brand books from this era. And this brand was registered to a woman named Cowley in Bighorn County in 1915. So that's one of the rare occasions. I've tried to research guns that I think are marked with brands before. This is the only time that we've actually located the person that brand was registered to. So, Carbine, Craig Carbine, circa 1892 and into the 20th century until about 1903. Okay, next in the series of Springfield Armory rifles is this 1903. This was developed as a replacement for the Kriegs. I didn't mention before that the Krieg being used in the Philippine War, an unfortunate motto of the time was, let's civilize them with a Krieg. That Philippine-American War was kind of a dark piece of American history. Anyway, now we're to 1903, and this is a 1903 Springfield chambered in .30-06. There was a predecessor cartridge, the 3003, and was replaced by the .30-06. Again, the military was relatively unhappy with the performance of the Krieg during the Spanish-American War, and the word went out they wanted a better rifle, and they did what companies often do, is they pretty much copied the German Mauser rifle to the point that they were sued and had to pay a fee for their transgression on the German patent of their Mauser action. This one is pretty cool. This is actually an 03. There was another version called the 03A3, the difference being a little bit in configuration. You can identify the 03A3 because it has a pistol grip here on the stock as opposed to this straight line stock. This is really cool because it's a Mark I, and it has this cut right here on this side. There was a firearms inventor named Pedersen, and many of his patents listed his home address as Jackson, Wyoming. And he invented the Pedersen device. And what it did was convert this 5-shot bolt-action rifle. When that device was inserted in this slot, it converted it to a 30-shot firearm, firing a less powerful but still quite effective caliber cartridge. So, Mark I, Springfield, 1903, cut for the Pedersen device. Pedersen had incredibly bad luck. He developed this device just as World War I ended. Obviously, these were an issue rifle in World War I, along with the Enfield, 1917 Enfield. So he developed this device right at the end of the war, so it never went into extensive production, and he was never able to capitalize on that invention. And a lot of the Pedersen devices were destroyed. Consequently, you'd need to look in your attic, because if you can find one in its original case, it's worth a ton of money these days. He also developed a competitor rifle to the M1 Grand, which was adopted by the United States military in 1935, and we'll take a look at one of those in just a minute. But again, he was a day late and a dollar short. They picked the Grand and not his rifle. So, 1903, Springfield Armory, 36 caliber bolt-action rifle, World War I. Okay, this is the last example of a Springfield Armory production rifle. This is an M1 Grand, also chambered in .30-06. It took a 8-round in-block clip that went in as a unit, and when you fired the last round, it ejected that empty in-block clip, and you could put another one in there and have another 8 rounds at your disposal. General George Patton called the M1 Grand the greatest battle implement ever invented. So no argument for me on that regard. Unfortunately, this one is missing the rear handguard. There would have been another wooden piece that fit in this area right here. And I've looked around, and the museum has a very limited budget, but for 50 or 60 bucks you can get a replacement wooden handguard that I've considered doing. Would be difficult to match the other furniture on the rifle. So there's kind of an interesting story that goes with this particular gun and others in the collection. In 1968, the guy who was the firearms dude at that point learned that one of the government arsenals would give to museums, free of charge, obsolete or obsolescent firearms. So he went, wow, how great is this? And ordered a bunch of them. Well, the outcome was disappointing because the law or regulation required that any of those firearms that were sent to a museum had to be demilitarized, which means you couldn't work the action, you couldn't open them up, you couldn't convert them into a working firearm. And what is crazy, in that same era, I was able to purchase from the Director of Civilian Marksmanship, the United States government, a working 1911 handgun. And they shipped it directly to me. In, when would this have been? Probably 1990s. I purchased one of these M1 Grands from that same outfit, a functioning rifle. They sent it to me in the mail at my house. But, oh my God, we can't give a functioning firearm to a museum. So your government is here to help you. But anyway, I've read a lot of the correspondence around this, and the gun guy was outraged because of some of the methodology that was used to demilitarize these guns. They just run a bead of weld right down there and burn the stock, scar the stock, create this weld, visible weld that made the gun pointless, even useless, even for display, for exhibit. So it was just really, really bizarre. We did get a few guns that are in good shape and suitable for exhibit, but I just thought, as did the person who was in charge of firearms at the time. It was crazy that they would damage these. This one appears to never have been issued, right? There's no wear whatsoever. It's a pristine gun, except for the missing handguard, and then they welded the dang thing shut. Okay, that's it for Springfield Firearms. If you have comments or questions, put them in the area below, or you can call the museum and they'll take a message and I'll get back to you. If you want to talk guns or Wyoming history or military artifacts, I'm kind of out of my wheelhouse on some of these, but I'm more into the older guns. But anyway, get in touch, and thanks for watching. I appreciate your support.